My name is David Matlow. I'm fortunate to be the owner of the largest collection of Herzl memorabilia outside of the Zionist archives in Jerusalem. For me, this is both a privilege and a responsibility. I believe there is much to be learned from Herzl, and I exhibit my collection, screen my movie, which is called My Herzl, and talk about Herzl to help people understand who Herzl was and what his significance continues to be. I want to thank the Israel Forever Foundation for providing me with the opportunity to spread Herzl's message and to help people be inspired by his life. Herzl died over 110 years ago. The state of Israel, which he had envisioned, exists. So why is Herzl still relevant? We can only begin to answer this question once we have a little information about Herzl, who he was, and what he tried to do. Herzl was born in Budapest in 1860, and he died 44 years later. Everything you will hear about Herzl, he accomplished in the short 44 years of his life. Although the standard narrative about Herzl pictures him as an assimilated Jew without any knowledge about the Jewish people, that is not really the case. He did attend Jewish school and had a bar mitzvah. When he was a teenager, his older sister Paulina died tragically. This was a severe blow to Herzl's family, and they moved to Vienna as part of the family's healing process. Herzl studied to be a lawyer, and in fact practiced law for a short time. However, he realized that he could not achieve his professional objective, which was to be a judge, because he was Jewish. This was not the first time that Herzl experienced anti-Semitism. He quit his college fraternity because of its anti-Semitic beliefs. The anti-Semitism Herzl experienced was prevalent in Europe. Although many of the historical shackles that applied to Jewish people throughout history were eliminated with the emancipation, Jews were still considered different and were subject to limitations as to how far they could progress in the various professions they chose to practice. After deciding not to pursue his career as a lawyer, Herzl became a playwright, wanting to write for the grand Viennese theaters. He was only moderately successful in this regard. However, one play that he wrote foreshadowed his Zionist activities to come. In 1894, he wrote a play called The New Ghetto, which discussed that Jews would never be accepted in European society and that they would always be victims of prejudice. And this is a copy of The New Ghetto written in German, the language in which the play was written. Herzl was also a journalist, writing short essays on travel or the human experience for a very prominent Viennese newspaper, the Neue Freie Presse, which was the New York Times of Europe in its day. He was a very well-known journalist who then received the plum assignment of being the Paris correspondent for his newspaper. It was in this position that he covered the Dreyfus trial in 1895. Dreyfus was a Jewish military officer who was falsely accused of passing state secrets. The trial brought out many issues in French society about the place of the Jew, culminating in chants outside the courtroom of death to the Jews. Not death to the traitor or death to the Jew, but death to all Jews. Dreyfus was convicted of these charges, and in a very public ceremony, he was degraded. He was stripped of his military office. And this is a newspaper from Paris in 1895, which shows the degradation ceremony. This would be Dreyfus and his sword being broken across the knee of a French soldier. This trial made Herzl realize that Jewish life in Europe was in danger, that something needed to be done. We now know how right he was. He sequestered himself in a Paris hotel and wrote the Judenstaat, the Jewish state, in 1896. The book was essentially a roadmap to solve the Jewish question of anti-Semitism. Stated simply, All of the Jews of Europe would move to Palestine. There would be no anti-Semitism in Europe because there would be no Jews there. And there would be no anti-Semitism in Palestine because there would only be Jews. This is a copy of a Hebrew translation of the Jewish state called Medinat HaYehudim, and the book was translated into 5 languages almost immediately, and this is a very early Hebrew translation of the Judenstaat. The Judenstaat created quite a sensation when it was published. To the Jews of Eastern Europe, this was a way out of their misery. To the assimilated Jews of Western Europe, this was dangerous, as it threatened all of the gains made to become accepted in European life. To many Orthodox Jews, this was heresy, since they believed that man cannot bring about the redemption, only God can. With the publication of the Judenstaat, when Herzl was 36, he embarked on an 8-year frenzy of activity for the Jewish people, which ended on his death 8 years later. Although others had thought of the idea of a Jewish state before Herzl did not know about them. He said, had he known about Leon Pinsker's book, Auto-Emancipation, which was written 15 years earlier, Herzl would not have bothered to write his own book. It is a good thing that he did. What distinguishes Herzl from all of the people who preceded him was that Herzl didn't just talk, dream, or think of a Jewish state. He did something about it. And so what did he do? Herzl organized the first Zionist Congress in Basel in 1897. This is a delegate card from that first Zionist Congress, which shows the imagery of Zionism at the time. People standing by the Western Wall and a farmer planting the seeds in the new land that would be the Jewish state. And this is from 1897. The first Zionist Congress was the first meeting of the Jewish people to discuss our own issues in 2,000 years. Delegates came from around the world to participate in the discussion. Herzl used his skills as a playwright and journalist to orchestrate the Congress as street theater. He insisted that everyone wear tuxedos. As our mothers would say, if you want to be taken seriously, you have to dress seriously. Herzl attended 6 congresses in his lifetime, the last one being in 1903. But the Zionist congresses continue. The 36th Congress was held in Jerusalem only a few years ago. The Zionist congresses were the Jewish parliament. Herzl said that most countries have a country and then they have a parliament, but we Jews do it the other way around. First we have a parliament, and then we will have a country. Secondly, Herzl formed the World Zionist Organization, whose mandate was to pursue and implement Zionist objectives. This quickly became an international organization which continues to this day. Herzl founded the Jewish Colonial Trust, a bank that invested in settlement and immigration activities in Palestine. And this was a company formed under English law which sold shares to Jews across Europe. This is a share certificate from that time. Each share was 1 British pound sterling, and hundreds of thousands of Jews bought shares for the Jewish Colonial Trust to show their affinity for Herzl's dream and their participation in this cause. A fourth thing that Herzl did was inspire the creation of the Jewish National Fund, the Keren Kayemet L'Yisrael, which was founded at the 5th Zionist Congress in 1901. The JNF was the fund of the Jewish people to purchase land in Palestine on behalf of all of us. These were all instruments of a country in creation. From 1896 to 1904, Herzl created these instruments of state, traveled across Europe to talk to people who could help him, and generally worked non-stop towards his Zionist dream. He sacrificed his health, his funds, and his family life to this cause. When he died in 1904, it was a tragedy. This is the newspaper from July 8, 1904, the Zionist newspaper Die Welt, the world, Ha'olam, which you can see in a big black square, declares that Herzl is dead. Herzl left his family destitute since he spent all their money to pursue the Zionist dream. The Jewish community created a fund to look after Herzl's children. All of the children were placed in foster homes, and Herzl's wife died a few short years later, and the children never recovered from this tragedy. Herzl was concerned about anti-Semitism, which is why he wrote the Judenstaat, and he knew that Jews were living on borrowed time in Europe. In fact, in 1902, Herzl wrote his book, Alt Neuland, Old New Land, which is really the story, an imaginary story, of two travelers who came to Palestine in 1902 and saw how destitute the land was, and then came back 20 years later and showed how the Jewish state had flourished in the intervening 20 years. Of interest in this particular book is that there are two characters who are in Europe talking to each other, and one says to the other, when describing the anti-Semitism in Europe in 1902, that pretty soon they will make us wear the yellow stars again. And how prescient was Herzl. Interestingly, this book, Alt Neuland, was translated by Nachum Sokolov as Tel Aviv. The great city of Tel Aviv is named after Herzl's book. And the solution to the issue of anti-Semitism for Herzl was the creation of a Jewish state. But for Herzl, the Jewish state was not only about a plot of land for the Jewish people, it was also about the kind of society that would be created on that land. Herzl believed the Jewish state would be a model society, an example for the whole world. He thought that the Arab communities would welcome the progress. Was Herzl naive? I guess so, but if he stopped to think of all the problems that the creation of the Jewish state would result, maybe he wouldn't have even started. So, after talking about Herzl's history for a little, what do we learn from him? Firstly, his motto, Im tirtzu ein zo agada. If you will it, it is no dream. Herzl believed that if you want something badly enough, you can make it happen. And this is not only true in creating Jewish states, because there will only be one and it already exists, but it applies to anything that we care about in our lives. Herzl believed that if you use your skills and your energy and your passion and apply it towards a cause that you believe in, you can make it happen. The creation of the Jewish state, standing in the shoes of Herzl's time in 1896, was the most ridiculous, most outrageous, most preposterous idea that anybody ever had. And it happened. So if that can happen, anything can happen. Herzl believed that anything can change. Herzl saw the Jewish condition in Europe and was scared about the storm coming. He set out to change that future, and he did. Unfortunately, the results of his efforts came a little too late to save most of the Jews of Europe, but the result of his efforts saved Jews from around the world up to this day. We also learn that Herzl had issues. He was mortal, just like us. As I mentioned, he sacrificed his funds, his health, and his family for the cause he believed in. He had his problems, but this did not diminish Herzl's greatness. In fact, to me, it enhances it. Because Herzl was not a Superman. He was just a man. And if Herzl, just a man, can do great things, then all of us can. During Pesach, Passover, our festival of freedom, we read Ezekiel's prophecy of the dry bones. Life was breathed back into the dry bones, yet they said, Avadnu tikvatenu. We have lost our hope. We are doomed. The Zionism that Herzl created and the state of Israel which resulted restored our national hope. We no longer say Avadnu tikvatenu. Instead, we proudly sing in our national anthem, which is called Hatikva, the hope, Od lo avda tikvatenu. We have not lost our hope. Herzl restored our hope. And Herzl causes me to ask myself every day, am I doing everything I can for the things that I believe in? This year, I am co-chairing the Toronto campaign for the United Jewish Appeal together with Andrea Cohen, and that's the United Jewish Appeal in Toronto. And this question motivates Andrea and I each and every day. And this year, we can both honestly say we are doing all that we can for what we believe in, for Israel and for our Jewish community. And everyone should consider each day whether they are doing all they can for what they believe in. Herzl's inspiration is alive in us today. Herzl's dream was fulfilled by the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. However, his work is not yet complete. Herzl envisioned a Jewish state that is safe, secure, and living in peace. That is now up to us to accomplish. Like Herzl, we have the power to change things and make them better. It is up to us to fashion the Jewish state we wish to have. I have taken Herzl's lessons to fire my passion for Israel and for the Jewish community. In the Israel Forever Foundation, I have found a community of like-minded people who wish to make Israel personal and to apply the lessons of Herzl, our other great leaders, and all of the amazing things that are happening in Israel to inspire us to continue to create the Jewish state that we wish to have. I would ask everyone who is watching this video to take Herzl's lessons and use them to motivate you to do the things you care about. Herzl teaches us we can do anything and everything is possible. Im tirtzu ein zo agada. If you will it, it is no dream.